Hello dear students, good morning and welcome to today's online lecture. Well, today I am going to talk about a very important problem, that is the problem faced by Pakistani learners in learning English. So before we move any further, let's have a look at the outline of today's lecture. Well, today I'll be looking at the learning difficulties for English as a second language and English as a foreign language learners, and then we'll survey the teaching of English in Pakistan. After that, we'll move on directly to talk about difficulties in speaking and listening English. And this will naturally bring us to some features of connected speech, especially assimilation, weak forms, and contraction. And in today's lecture, I will also be talking about stress and intonation. And I will conclude today's talk by, by trying to find out certain solutions to the problems. So learning a foreign or a second language is a lengthy and complex process, and it involves knowledge of several things such as grammar, vocabulary, culture, and pronunciation, among others. And oral communication is considered more difficult than writing, primarily due to its spontaneity and fleeting nature. And all over the world, there are many learners who can read and write in a foreign language, but find it a challenging task to orally communicate in that. And this is very natural. And now, why this happens so? And there are certain difficulties which are faced by second and foreign language learners. And these problems are mainly due to two factors. One is the wrong teaching methodology, and the other is mother tongue interference. Now, Pakistani learners are no exception. Pakistani learners also face tremendous difficulties due to the aforementioned factors, that is the wrong teaching methodology or mother tongue interference. So if we survey the teaching of English in Pakistan, then we will see that there is a lot of emphasis on reading and writing skills, and speaking and listening are totally ignored. And moreover, it's very surprising that there is no chunk to test the speaking, and the result is both listening and speaking skills are totally ignored. And this is the scenario in most government schools. The classrooms are overcrowded, and the teacher-student ratio in some classes is 1 to 100. It means there is one teacher for every 100 students. And then to further complicate the issue, there is rote memorization. Students are memorizing letters, stories, and essays that are there every year in the examination. So they know full well that if they memorize these letters, stories, and essays, they will be able to get through the exam. And another very big problem that complicates the situation is there are literature-oriented books and they are outdated. These literature-oriented books, they are based on classics, and their primary aim is to familiarize the students with literature and not language. And then the teaching methodologies that are being used in the classrooms, they are outdated, and most of the time grammar translation method is being used. So you cannot teach to train your students become fluent language learners, become fluent language speakers if you use an outdated teaching methodology such as grammar translation, or commonly known as GTM method. Now, another thing is most of the classes are teacher centered, where teacher is the center of attraction and everything is revolving around the teacher. Teacher is thought to be the sole knowledge giver. Teacher comes into the classroom, he or she delivers the lecture, and the students listen to him or her and pen down each and every word which he tells. And now who the teacher is, the teacher in most cases is poorly qualified, and he himself or herself is the product of outdated teaching methodology, that is grammar teaching method. He or she has very little command over spoken English. So how the person who has got very little command over spoken English be able to teach spoken English to the students, to the learners? So the learners who are already demotivated, they do not learn anything. Their difficulties are compounded many times. And again, to further complicate the issues, there are examinations. The pressure of exam is there, and exam system encourage only rote learning. Students and teachers both know that the same questions will be there. So what they do is they only try to memorize things. They do not try to learn English. They do not try to write down in English. They do not try to speak English, and there is only a rat race for marks. And moreover, English is taught as a subject in Pakistani classrooms, not as a language. Teachers teach about English and not English, and the result is learners learn about English and not English. If you ask them a question about adjective or adverb or another part of speech, they will be able to tell the definition. They will be able to find out, they will be able to find out adjective and adverb from a sentence or a paragraph, but they will not be able to speak English correctly. They may at best be able to write a disjointed piece of writing, but when it comes to speaking, they are a total failure, And those very handful lucky ones who can communicate orally speak in an unnatural way and also face difficulties in talking to native speakers. They cannot convey their message and they cannot understand the native speakers, and when they speak, most of them speak in an unnatural and artificial way. And here I would like to remind my viewers that I am talking about the difficulties faced by Pakistani speakers in speaking and listening English primarily. So why Pakistani learners face so many problems? So there are certain things inherent in English language which further complicate the issues, and one big problem is that there are 26 alphabets but 44 sounds in English. There is no one-on-one relationship between English spellings and pronunciation. We know the word C-U-P, cup, and there is a word C-E-I-L-I-N-G, ceiling. Why the word is pronounced as cup and why the word is pronounced as ceiling, not keeling? So another problem related to English is that English people speak so fast is a complaint I often hear from my students, and often from those at an advanced level where ignorance of the vocabulary is not the reason for their lack of comprehension. When students see a spoken sentence in its written form, they have no trouble comprehending. Why this happens? The reason, it seems, is that speech is a continuous stream of sounds without clear-cut boundaries between each verse. In spoken discourse, we adapt our pronunciation to our audience and articulate with maximal economy of movement rather than maximal clarity. Thus, certain words are lost and certain phonemes linked together as we attempt to get our message across. Now, Underhill defines connected speech as a flow of sounds which are modified by a system of simplifications through which phonemes are connected, grouped and modified. This simplification is an unconscious process, and most of the first language learners or most of the first language speakers or L1 speakers are often unaware of this as they practice it. So, the goal of connected speech is to reduce the articulatory effort required to send the message, even though whole chunks of phonetic details are left out by L1 speaker to maximize the ease of communication. Native speaker decodes these messages using the different types of support knowledge in his repertoire. Now, the problem with Pakistani learners is that they do not have any idea of this feature, that is connected speech. They have not been trained in this way. They have been trained to read and write in the classroom. So, when they interact with the native speaker, they do not understand what is happening. When the native speaker speaks and he or she speaks at a very fast rate, Pakistani learners is in a fix. He or she does not understand what is happening. He or she gets puzzled. So, the result is a failure. Another problem which Pakistani English language learners face, especially in listening and in pronouncing the words, is due to assimilation. And we know that L1 speakers speak at a pace of 350 syllables per minute in formal speeches and 400 to 450 words in informal speech, because when the tongue has to move from one articulating position to another at this pace, only an approximation of the phoneme can be produced. Thus, all phonemes occurring within a word or in a stream of speech influence one another and adjust with the phonemes of their neighbors. Here I would again like to quote Underhill, who summarizes assimilation as the natural result of the various speech organs cutting corners as they perform their complex sequence of movements. Now, when native speakers speak, they assimilate and assimilation takes place. Non-native speakers, for example, Pakistani learners of English, they do not understand what is happening, they are lost. And when they speak, they do not use this feature of connected speech. That is why their speech seems to be unnatural and artificial. Now, another concept which Pakistani learners are not familiar with is weak forms. We know that there are a large number of words in English which can have a full form and a weak form. This is because English is a stressed time language, and in trying to make the intervals between stressed syllables equal to give the phrase rhythm, we need to swallow non-essential words. Thus, conjunctions, pronouns, preposition, auxiliaries and articles are often lost, causing comprehension problem for students, particularly for those whose language is syllable times. And here I would like to remind you that Urdu is a syllable timed language, whereas English is a stressed timed language. So, Pakistani learners especially face problems due to the presence of weak and strong forms in English, and they do not realize that a word may have a weak form and may have a strong form in another place. So, some examples of words which have weak forms are and. For example, when native speakers will speak this, he will say fish and chips. So, and will be spoken as a weak form, it will be pronounced as n, fish and chips. A chair and a table. In writing, this will be a chair and a table, but when a native speaker will be pronouncing it, he will be pronouncing it as a chair and a table. So, and will be pronounced as a weak form. And then can. She can speak Spanish better than I can. The first can is the weak form, the second the full form. Same is the case with have. Have also got a weak form and a full form. Have you finished? This is a weak form. Yes, I have. Now, here have is a full form, and now should also have weak form and strong forms. Well, you should have told me. Here both should and have are weak forms. And now another thing which creates problem for Pakistani learners is the presence of contractions in English. If you look at contractions, contractions are words or phrases that are shortened by dropping one or more letters and replacing the letter or letters with an apostrophe. Only one apostrophe is used in a contraction no matter how many letters are removed. Now, contractions are very common in spoken English. There are no contractions in Urdu or other languages spoken in Pakistan. So, when Pakistani learners speak, they use full forms and they appear to be unnatural or artificial, because Pakistani learners have exposure only to literary text and have no idea of this common feature of spoken English. They also face difficulties in understanding native speakers. Why? Because the native speakers of English will be using lots of contractions in his or her spoken English. And as I said, when they use full forms, they will again appear to be bookish and unnatural in speaking. So, there are twofold problems. One is when they speak, they will speak in an unnatural and artificial way, and the other problem is they will face difficulties in understanding the native speakers due to contractions. Okay, here are some common contractions. Are not is contracted as aren't, cannot, can't, could not, couldn't, did not, didn't, does not, doesn't, have not, haven't, he will, he'll, I would, I'd, I am, So another thing which causes difficulties for Pakistani learners is stress. As I said earlier, English is a stress time language and Urdu is a syllable time language. Urdu learners face lots of difficulties in producing the correct stress, and they have no idea where to put stress. And one of the most important pronunciation points in English is stress. Wrong stress may result in difficulty in comprehension. I would like to give you an example of two words here. One is console. If the stress is on the first syllable, then it will be a noun. If the stress is on the second syllable, it will be a verb. For example, console, it's a syllable, the first syllable is stressed, and if I say console, the second syllable is stressed. Similarly, the word is combine. If I say combine, if the stress is on the first syllable, it will be a noun. If the stress is on the second syllable, the word will be a verb. So, this is an additional cause of difficulty for Pakistani learners of English, because as I discussed earlier on, Pakistani learners only have exposure to literary texts where the teacher is most of the time preoccupied in reading and writing in his Desi style. He does not have any idea about corrected speech or stress or any of the common features of English. That is why students have lots of difficulties. And then there is the problem of intonation. Rise and fall in the pitch or voice is called intonation. Pakistani English speakers speak with a very flat tone and they fail to realize that English is a rhythmic language. Now, I have talked about problems, this problem, that problem. So, let us very quickly try to see the solutions. Is there any solution? So, there are a few things which can possibly be done to solve this problem. The one is that students should be exposed to authentic spoken resources, whereby they will be learning features of spoken English, such as connected speech or contractions or other things. And then teachers should be given training in spoken English, the class size should be reduced, and new textbooks should be written with a focus to teach language, teach English in this case, and not about language. And the teaching methodology should be changed from teacher-centered to learner-centered, and then the exam system should be overhauled, because this system has got a very negative backwash effect with no testing component, speaking and listening. So long as there will be no test of speaking and listening in the exam, there will be no teaching of listening and speaking in the classroom. If these skills are ignored in the exam, the result will be these skills will continue to be ignored in the classroom also. So here are some solutions, possible solutions to the problem. So thank you very much for listening to me.